The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of The Good Place, Seasons 3 and 4, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings of this TV show. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin and Mike Denz. Last time on Secrets of Movies and TV Shows, we discussed Season 3 of The Good Place, and if you haven't yet listened to that episode, please be sure to do that first. But now, we continue with our discussion of Season 4, how it ended, and our overall thoughts on the whole series of The Good Place. So let's move to that then. So now we're to the fourth season.
We got a little mini series to talk about, though,
right?
Because between the third and fourth season, they released a series of short webisodes. It was a 6-part series called The Search,
The Selection.
Yes. And it's all set in the bad place, and it's Sean and the other demons trying to figure out who should we send into this experiment now that we have this choice that the judge has given us.
Right.
And it's about how they come up with the idea, because originally they're thinking, serial killers. But they know they can't do that.
Yeah.
And so they eventually come across the idea of let's send the worst people for our protagonists. And so you can watch this on the YouTube channel, and it's also on Amazon streaming and stuff like that. So you got a little extra bonus 6-part miniseries to set up season 4.
Yeah, they're like 10 minutes or so each. They're not very long,
or less.
Yeah, and some of them are kind of like funny tangents, like the one where they had to decide their takeout order for their meeting, where they're going to be deciding things, and they, like, of course, being demons, they order like all these gross things, and it's funny. It's and you just see Sean at his demon worst.
Yeah, and it's also more. It's like Mad Men in hell again, because it's this icky early 60s evil office environment, and they're cruel to each other and stuff. By the way, one thing that, and I don't know if I mentioned this in our previous podcast, but one of the things I find hilarious about The Bad Place is the insults. Because being demons, they're constantly insulting people.
Right.
But they're the lamest insults. I mean, they'll like call someone jerkface or something.
Yeah.
It's just childish, grade school level insults.
Ding dong. Yeah.
Ding dongs. Yeah. Things like that. And it's like not what a real demon would come up with, because a real demon, being smart, would be able to come up with much more effective insults than calling someone a ding dong. It would be like, did you know that most of the people who are associated with you don't believe that you are as smart as you personally think you are?
Oh, ouch.
It's like, because just name calling is not creative insults.
Yes.
And I love how banal the insults are. Right.
That is true. So we start with the season 4. And Eleanor's welcoming the humans. But meanwhile, we should point out that all of the other people in this Good Place neighborhood are Janet's quote unquote
Janet babies,
children. Right? She's running them. She's a machine of a sort, not a robot, but as she says. But she has all of these iterations of herself that look different and act different that she's running too, and so she's
taxing the CPU.
Right.
Her bandwidth is pretty much tapped with all the people she has to control.
So then we meet Brent, the entitled male chauvinist who treats everybody horribly.
He treats Janet like she's his personal assistant.
Like she's been assigned a personal assistant. Right. And then Linda, who's an old woman who seems to be uninterested in everything. She's just blah.
And we retread a lot of ideas for cool things in The Good Place that we saw at the beginning of season 1, which were originally designed to like torture Eleanor and the others. It's like, oh, it's flying day. We're all going to have the power of flight for 4 hours, but Eleanor doesn't get to do it for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And so the new lady, the little old lady, is like, they're trying to get her to be excited about being in the afterlife so she'll be emotionally engaged and want to improve. But it's like, okay, it's flying day. Don't you want to do that? And she just like hovers 6 inches off the floor. It's like, it's nice.
Yes. She's like the worst grandma ever. She's just
bored grandma.
Bored grandma. Well, what happens is we find out that and then the fourth, it ends up that's Linda. She's the fourth.
We have John, the gossip columnist, Simone, the neuroscientist.
Oh, yes.
Brent, the businessman, and bored grandma.
But what we find out is that bored grandma Linda is really a demon in disguise that Sean has snuck in there to mess with them.
Yeah.
Now, as punishment to the bad place for tampering with things, the judge decides that Chidi would be the fourth human for the test, which think is good for our Soul Squad, because Chidi's already shown that he's can morally improve. So that's great. We already have one bringer, right?
And he helped the first group improve, and so obviously he's a great person to have in the second group to help them improve.
Right. Now, meanwhile, Eleanor is struggling with the idea that she has to lead this. She doesn't think she's a good leader. She has no self-confidence. And Michael eventually he
fesses up, or she susses out, and he fesses up that panic attack was not real.
Right.
That was to put her in the leadership position, and Michael did it because he thinks he's not being a human himself. He doesn't fully understand humans, and there's so much writing on this. He wants someone in charge of the experiment who does understand humans, and that needs to be a human, and Eleanor is the best leader of the group.
And she proves it by first convincing Brent that there's a better place, or best place, better than the good place, that he's trying to get into.
Yeah, you could get into that best place if you do some good deeds.
Right. Like, so, I mean, he's already dead in the afterlife, but she's trying to convince him that there's and that's sort of motivates Brent for a while. And then she has Chidi connect with Simone as his soulmate, because Simone's problem is that Simone believes that this is all, she doesn't believe in an afterlife, and that everything she's experiencing is just a trick of her dying brain. And so she treats everything as if it's not real.
And that leads to some real comedy, because she gets to behave very inappropriately, not meaning in a morally lewd way or anything,
right,
but just she breaks all kinds of social conventions.
Right.
Like acting like a clown and stuff like that in inappropriate situations, because she doesn't think any of this is real. And Chidi essentially does what I would do in that situation, which is Pascal's wager her.
Yes.
I mean, I can't prove to you that this isn't all a hallucination, but it's a hallucination that keeps asserting itself, and you don't know for a fact that it's not a hallucination. So given that you're going to slip into treating it like it's real anyway, and given that if it is real, you're being really obnoxious to everyone around you, just be nice. That's not going to hurt anything.
Right. Now, I have to tell you, the funniest moment in the entire series occurs around this point of the fourth season.
In your opinion?
I think it's an objective reality. So what I think is the funniest point. So Chidi is given, for his afterlife, in which I think it would be like mine, his idea of a great afterlife is he has this room full of every book he'd ever want to read, and he can call any book to himself just by holding out his hand and requesting it, sort of like Thor. Yeah, Thor in his hammer. So at one point he's outside with everybody, and he requests a book, and then he gets distracted, and we have this whole scene of things happen, and then suddenly at the end of the scene, we think the scene's over. All of a sudden the book flies in from off stage, smacks him in the head, and knocks him out. And I was so unexpected and funny. I just died laughing. I watched it like 10 times in a row, laughing more and more each time. I love that scene. I love the physical humor, but it was so funny. So meanwhile,
all the clever, crafty, amazing, intelligent writing in this, and it's a book flying out of nowhere when you didn't expect it.
Yeah, exactly. It's I have lowbrow humor. Let's get out of the way.
It works. There's humor on multiple levels.
Yes.
I just wanted to talk about Brent just a little bit more, and I realize that you said basically what he is, but the humor of Brent is that he, unlike Eleanor, who really right away says, "I don't belong here," and they set up.
Oh yeah, it's great because he's like, "I don't belong here. I think I belong somewhere better."
Yeah, and Jason, they introduced him in the first season as a monk. Which was brilliant because he couldn't talk, which really hid the fact that he was so stupid.
Yes.
But Brent, he really thinks he belongs there. He thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. And no matter what neurotic, horrible thing he does, to him, this is good. And it reminds me of an episode in Frasier when Niles and Frasier go to this spa. And they find out while they're in the spa that there's a gold door. And why can't we go in the gold door? They love the spa. Everything's great. But when they see the gold door, they're like, well, we should be able to get in the gold door. Well, what's in the gold door? And then once they get in the gold door, they're so happy because it's so amazing. But then they see a platinum door. So the same thing is done to Brent with this idea of there's a better place. And if we can make him dissatisfied with what's going on here if we just tell him there's a better place, which is just brilliant. And it reminded me of that Frasier trick they did with the spa.
Well, it's kind of, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but put a pin in that because this is kind of related to how the season eventually ends. This idea of the better thing makes me happier with or at least more willing to try to attain more for myself. But we'll put a pin on that and come back to that. But that's a good point you're making there.
So there's various complications in helping people improve, but ultimately most of them do. Tahani and John go to a spa together, and they realize that even though they were on opposite sides of the velvet rope at like premieres and stuff,
right? They
both secretly felt alone and vulnerable. And that's how they acted over that. Right. And so John apologizes for all the terrible things he said about Tahani, and she accepts that, and they're reconciled. Similarly, Simone has grown more compassionate as well now that she stopped treating the afterlife as if it's an illusion and she's being rude to everybody. And but then there are complications because at one point Chidi has gotten so relaxed that he needs to be challenged to engage. And so Jason, like he did in the first season with Eleanor, confesses to Chidi, I'm not really a monk. I don't belong here. There's been some horrible mistake. And you need to promise not to tell anybody, which is like going to drive Chidi crazy because he's going to think he's lying to people by pretending that Jason is really a monk, and a Buddhist monk, by the way. And so that gets Chidi re-engaged. But then John, the gossip columnist, discovers that Chidi is not a monk. And
Jason's not a monk.
Jason's not a monk. And that's going to drive John crazy because he's a gossip columnist. Of course he wants to tell people this bit of juicy news. But he doesn't. And so he also grows morally. The one who's not growing morally is Brent, the businessman. And when the year is up, they're getting desperate because Brent has not grown. And the others are so annoyed with Brent. I mean, he's done things that push them away, like writing a cheap novel that glorifies him but makes them look bad.
A Chip Driver mystery.
He's done a Romana Clef. He's just changed everybody's name. But this is like what he secretly thinks of everybody. And that's driven everybody away. And so they do another callback to the first season where there was a giant sinkhole. And so they let him fall into a giant sinkhole to see if the others will rescue him and thus rally them as a group to get, moral good points. And only Chidi does. John and Simone walk away.
Right.
And John, Brent is offended by that. He has not grown morally. But just as the experiment is ending, in like the last half second, he starts to apologize to Chidi.
Yes.
And then everybody freezes because the experiment is over. Now, this show has modern sensibilities on things in ways that are not always to its favor. One of the things I think is an example of that is this guy, the white old guy, is the one who doesn't improve.
Right.
I think that was a deliberate selection on the part of the creators, and I think it is deliberately meant to play into modern sensibilities. It ever since actually really the 60s, but especially beginning in the 70s, the father figure in TV shows is the buffoon.
Right.
Compare Marge and Homer Simpson. Or you watch advertisements, the wife is the smart one and the husband is the stupid one.
Or every sitcom.
Every sitcom. And this is Hollywood chauvinism. So this is an aspect of the series that I don't like. I think they should have let Brent improve alongside everybody else, treat everybody the same.
He also represented stereotypes, false stereotypes, but stereotypes of conservative men. He's successful at business and just kind of labeling him with all the different types of things that people will relate to somebody who is conservative, whether it's politically or religiously or whatever, that aren't true, so that he can't get better. And as you said, he's the white guy as well. So but I looked at it more of like, he's a businessman, so obviously there's no way he's going to get any better. He's successful, and
right,
that's not good.
Right. Yeah, that bothered me too a little bit because there's a whole lot of talk in these days in general in entertainment about seeing myself in for people to see representation. Yeah. The only representation I see is people like Brent. A lot of not only, but very often.
He's clearly meant to be someone that will represent a good chunk of the audience, and he's the only one who doesn't get to improve.
Right, and
he's just the hate object.
What I say to Hollywood is, if you think that conservative white men are bad, show them ways to be them becoming better, not. See how bad you are? You're never going to get better. That doesn't help people improve, I'm with you, Jimmy. I don't want to belabor that too much, but it is a really good point that is a really a fault in this series that they did that. It also betrays with the point system. At this point he's improved, but has he improved enough to get over the hump? And at this point I was thinking how different this is from Christian thought, which is, and we'll get more into this in a bit when we look at the series as a whole, but just the turn is enough with Christ. It's just asking for forgiveness of Christ is enough to change things around. And this is you've gotten a little better, but you've got to make up for all the bad things you've done. You've got to do a lot more.
And they actually, so when they announced the results of the experiment, everybody improved except Brent, and he actually he lost points over the course of the experiment.
Right.
And he just had this teeny little uptick right at the end. But they use that to argue that there's hope even for someone like Brent, and therefore the point system needs to be revised and humanity needs to be given another chance. And Judge Jen agrees.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, she's going to reboot the entire universe and let humanity evolve all over again. So everybody is going to be dead.
So you're going to have to wait a couple, was it 4 billion years or something? They tell Sean, you're not going to be able to torture anybody for the next 4 billion years, which is a bad thing. And, there's Michael's argument is that humans have a capacity for self-improvement even after death. And I was thinking that sort of reminds me of the whole parable of Lazarus and the rich man. The whole the rich man has this self-improvement where he wants to go have Lazarus go back and tell his brothers to make it into heaven. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting idea that this show looks at that it's possible to improve after death, whereas it really isn't. You are who you are at the moment of your judgment. But it's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, because the new system they propose is that every human that dies will be subjected to a personalized test of moral development in the afterlife.
And they're allowed to go through it as many times as needed. And some of them may never improve. But so they essentially, and this is a solution proposed by Chidi, and eventually Sean and Michael agree to it.
Right.
Sean, just because he wants to keep torturing Michael. Right. This will let him keep doing that.
Yeah.
So he's not being altruistic at all. But the proposal is basically we run every human being who dies from here on out through season 1 as many times as needed for them to get into the good place. And some of them may never get there. They may remain stuck in season 1 with this set of personalized challenges in the afterlife that are kind of like torture, but also may help them improve morally. So it's basically purgatory.
Yeah. Isn't this the part where Chidi remembers everything? They bring him back to the his complete self of all his different lives that he's led. And he's now this guru because of all his experience, and he's no longer indecisive, and he's able to come up with his plan to do it. And I don't want to forget the judge, who's played by Maya Rudolph.
Brilliantly. She's fun.
Yeah, she's like this great comedy relief, because she's this ultimate power, and she's a goofball who's actually, as much as she's like, I'm going to reset everything, she's obsessed with all the lesser things of Earth. She loves to binge watch TV, and she's obsessed with certain actors and stuff, and how
Timothy Olyphant. Yeah,
she binge watches Netflix and has crushes on some of the male actors.
Yeah. So it's like, she's she's played great, and and she's not. When I go through this, the absence of a God character is obvious, but there are certain people that are given the God qualities, and she seems to be one of them, the closest thing to God that we have, even though she's not. But
more like a Greek
her personality and her interests are nowhere near, God, yet she just happens to have this power that she can wield because she's the judge.
Different people, since there is no God that we're presented with in this series, different people have different godlike powers.
Yeah, like Janet is very much kind of like a godlike character, even though she's not even a person. She's able to do anything pretty much, and she knows everything. Janet
is omniscient and can create stuff out of nothing.
Yeah.
The judge gets to decide people's fates. Michael is an initial person who's sort of a god surrogate as the architect of the neighborhood.
Right.
And so they all have different aspects of divinity to them.
It's really like one of the ancient pantheons, the Romans, the Greeks, the Assyrians. It's a pantheon of people who share in these godlike powers in various forms. So, and one of the things with this new system is as people go through that process of how many of the times before they can improve enough, they retain a little bit of knowledge of their previous times through, which feels like a little voice in your head, i.e. a conscience, to help them along to keep improving.
The same way our characters retained their subconscious knowledge of the afterlife at the beginning of season 3.
And so, as a reward for having basically fixed the afterlife, the 4 Soul Squad are given this opportunity to go to the good place. They get in, which in another show, this would be the end of the series. They get in and we don't get to see the good place.
Yeah. And before we go there, I wanted to mention that, there's an additional complication. After the judge agrees to the new plan, they've got to sell the demons on it.
Right.
And a lot of the demons have trouble with this. And even once they accept, okay, this is how it's going to be now, we're going to be playing these torturers, they're having trouble figuring out how to torture people in subtle ways that will help them morally improve. I mean, it's just they want to go straight for the physical torture stuff. And it's actually Vicky, who is a long-term, and we've been seeing other demons improve and bad Janets improve.
Right.
So it wasn't just Michael who improved.
We skipped over when they had all the Janets hiding something from the judge, so she couldn't eliminate the
universe reset clicker.
Because she was going to reset it to begin with. Then she changed. They convinced her not to.
Played keep away.
Yeah.
And so the some of the demons, like there's the little nebbishy guy,
Glenn,
who's Sean's assistant, Glenn.
Yeah.
He comes around, and Bad Janet comes around, and Vicky comes around.
right?
And she is actually really good at helping the other demons see how to help humans improve through subtly presenting them with challenges.
Right.
And Michael is actually threatened by that and starts pouting and childishly trying to cut her out and stuff. But eventually he gets over it, and so Vicky is now on board and playing a productive role.
Right. In fact, he lets her stage a coup against him to assume leadership of this whole project, and in letting her believe that she did the demon thing and took over when he kind of just let her.
And so then it's announced everyone gets into the good place, and they get in a balloon, which is previously a method that they fake got into the good place with, or
right,
as part of the torture, or actually it's a little after that. But now for reals, they get to go up in a balloon into the good place, and that's where the series could end,
but doesn't.
And should have ended, but doesn't.
Yes. So here's this is the last couple episodes of this series. They get to the good place. They meet the Greek philosopher Hypatia, and played by Phoebe from Friends.
I was going to say Phoebe, yeah.
And everyone in the good place, they find out, because there hasn't been a new person in the good place, remember, for 521 years. Everyone there has become a happiness zombie, as they say. An eternity of perfection has led to boredom. Everybody has done everything good, and now we're just sort of zombies, happy zombies wandering around. And so their solution to this is to invent an oblivion door. When you get tired of eternity, you can walk through this door and you cease to exist. You're gone. Just poof.
The Phoebe character who Chidi was so excited to meet.
Yes.
I forget her name again.
Hypatia.
Hypatia, but she's called Patty in this.
Yeah. She's deteriorated because she's become so bored. Her great intelligence and everything has kind of turned to mush, and she's nothing like Chidi thought she was going to be because of this. And that's part of their motivation. Like, look what happens to people like this,
right?
When they're left in the good place for too long.
And the point of the oblivion door is not just to simply end it all, but they justify it by saying the lack of having to strive for anything makes life, including the afterlife of perfection, makes it boring and degrades us, and therefore having this option of oblivion makes living better.
And it's knowing that this state will never improve and also will never end.
Yeah.
That's making people have ennui. And so by having an end point now, you mean I can leave this party when I get tired?
Right.
Oh, well, now that makes the party more interesting for me. So the Hypatia and others start re-engaging, at least for a while, until they get bored.
Right. And so we see our own four characters. They're going through eternity, and they do all the things that they want to do. And they say the good place is having enough time with the people you love. That's sort of like the foundation. And then eventually,
and everything's measured by that guy's name. I forget what his
Jeremy
Jeremy
Bearimy. Yeah,
Jeremy Bearimy's. How we've gone through so many Jeremy Bearimys.
Right. And so you figure it's like some sort of eternities where you've read every book, you've visited every place, you've done everything. And interestingly, the first person who's ready to go is Jason. He's the first one ready to go through the door.
When he plays the perfect Madden NFL game,
yes.
He's played it perfectly. The perfect game finally, and so
he's got nothing more to accomplish.
Yeah.
And so he and Janet go to the door, and he's got this necklace he wants to give everybody, lost it on the way. And the door is like this gateway through these trees, which makes me creepy walking in the forest now, walking between trees. I don't want to walk between the wrong two trees. But and so Janet leaves him there. The funny thing is Jason doesn't actually go through the door at this point. He spends
he
another
looks for the necklace.
Yeah, he spends another eternity looking for the necklace in the woods that he dropped.
And skipping rocks on lakes and just becoming a monk, basically, which was the irony of the whole thing.
Then it's Chidi who gets bored, and
actually before that, it's
Tahani.
Tahani.
Yeah.
And she is getting ready to go through the door, and at the last minute, she gets a purpose. She decides she's a hostess. That's her training. And so she wants to become a good place architect. Even though she's a human, she wants to do what Michael and the others have been doing and help other people improve. So she finds a new purpose in the afterlife and goes off on that path.
That's right.
Also, Eleanor convinces Mindy St. Cloud, the miserable-ish dweller of the medium place, to undertake moral renovation as well. So we have closure on that. Also, Derek, the boyfriend that was created back in season 2 by Janet on The Rebound.
Yeah.
He was actually here and had a bit of a rivalry at the beginning of season 4 and the end of season 3 with Jason because he was helping Janet make Janet babies.
That's right.
Not in the way you might imagine.
Yeah, not in the biblical sense.
But he has annoyed Mindy St. Cloud so many times and has been reset by her and evolved so many times that he's now this like mystical glowing head figure.
That's right.
With him, he's orbiting himself.
Yeah.
He's his own like solar system. Yeah.
So Chidi. So we come to the end where we have Chidi has decided that he's had enough. He's perfectly happy, but he's really fulfilled. And Eleanor doesn't want to let him go. She fears abandonment. And so she starts trying to take him to places that he'll love to kind of keep giving him a purpose. And I think they actually filmed this in Greece and in Paris, as far as I could tell. Nothing. I mean, these days you can create anything on a soundstage, with special effects. But I kind of got the sense that they were actually at the Acropolis, where, of course, all the famous Greek philosophers were, and they were in Paris, where Jean-Paul Sartre was, and yet none of that.
I wondered. I've been to the Acropolis, and I thought it looks smaller than I remember.
Oh, maybe they went to the one at Disney World. But perhaps. And so I've never been, so I'll take your word for that one. But nothing works.
Mistaken.
Yeah, nothing works, and so she finally has to let Chidi go. And
the thing is, though, this is a moment of moral growth for her in a fairly subtle way, because Chidi is willing to stay for her.
Right.
And he'll continue to have his relationship with her. He'll do everything to make her happy, but she's going to know he would rather go through the door in his heart, even though he's committed to making her happy, which is what love is.
Right.
But because wanting the other person's good is what love is, she's grown to the point that she genuinely loves him and is willing to let him go.
So she lets him go through the door to oblivion and not exist anymore, which is a little...
we'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. So, there's so much to say about that, but so let's get to it. And then finally, Eleanor... Michael can't use the door because he's a demon or a fallen angel.
He's not a human.
Not a human. So Eleanor persuades the judge to let Michael become a human and live life on Earth so that eventually he can come to the good place and go through the door when he is ready. And so Michael ends up on Earth living a perfectly ordinary life in I think Phoenix, or LA or something. And then that leaves Eleanor ready to go. And she goes through the door and disperses into little glowy bits.
Dissolves into little glowy, yellow, glowy, sparkly bits.
Yeah, and in her sparkly, soully bits rain down on Earth and inspire a man to return a wrongly delivered letter to its intended recipient, Michael, who thanks the man and tells him to take it sleazy, and which was one of Eleanor's
callback.
Yeah, classic.
Because Michael had always fantasized about being a human and telling someone, take it sleazy, which was always a cringe-inducing line, and is especially a cringe-inducing line as the final line of the series.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we've learned.
Yeah.
So that's the series. let's talk about this concept of the afterlife and the way it ended. This big thesis is, what is the nature of life after death, and how does our life here on Earth affect that? And that's really what we're looking at.
Real quick to something. Yeah. I'm as excited to get to this as you are.
Okay.
But when I wasn't sure if I should or should not talk about this when we brought it up, but when the demons were trying to learn how to help people become good by what they were doing, it was, I don't know how they stumbled upon it, but literally the writers stumbled upon exactly how God uses demons to help us become better by how they subtly tempt us, how it has to be more tricky and subtle and needle us just the right way. And so suddenly they weren't the bugling, they bad at insulting demons that they were before, which never would have worked because we would have just ran away from them. They were now the subtle demons that are described in Genesis. You know, Satan is the most subtle, and how they were doing it. And it's interesting to me is that just something they stumbled upon because it's a truth, or is it something that they actually, figured out somehow? I don't, I mean, I think it was a little bit of both, but that was interesting to me how they did that.
Also, the principle that God, this is speaking from a Christian point of view, God would not allow an evil like torture unless he had some way of bringing a good out of it, a greater good. So just like these demons they're intending to torture people, but really it's going to help them.
Yeah. And it doesn't, without a God figure in the story, they're left with trying to make sense of certain things. Like, why would these demons be interested in helping these people become good by doing it this way? Well, it's because it's a new plan. Oh, okay, then we have to do it that way. But that doesn't really, without God, obviously, a lot of this doesn't make sense. And that brings us to the problem of heaven without God, or the good place without God.
Yeah, and so this is a question, any fiction is not the real world.
Right.
But there's not a problem. God doesn't have a problem with fiction depicting the world in a way other than it is. If he did have a problem with depicting the world in a way other than it is, Jesus would not have told parables.
Right.
Because when Jesus says there was a father with two sons, it is a mistake to ask, what were their names? Jesus is using a fiction to communicate something which contains a truth that he wants us to get. So when you have a fiction, you look at it and you say, okay, what are the good elements here? You don't expect it to correspond to the way the world is. So when I look at something like The Good Place, I say, okay, what elements of truth are here? And are there enough that I'm interested in watching it or reading it or listening to it or whatever the case may be? But I don't expect it to be the way the real world is. Now, secretly, anytime I'm reading or watching something and it makes it sound like there isn't a God, I always headcanon that as like, oh yeah, there is. This is just okay, Azathoth and Cthulhu, but no, really, there's God, and this is just something he's allowing, and this is not our world. Or here in The Good Place, it's like, okay, this is another world. It's a parallel reality, but really there's God. These people just aren't aware of it, and they're able to do this stuff in their little pocket universe.
Right.
So that's my own headcanon, is there's always God, regardless of what parallel universe we're looking at. And then I look at, okay, we've got these demons here, and actually they're not demons. In fact, when that first comes up, Michael says that term is racist.
Yeah.
Which is a great line. But I don't have to have the afterlife depicted the way it is in the real world. I don't have to have angels and demons depicted the way they are in the real world. The angels on Battlestar Galactica are not as good as real angels are. The demons on The Good Place are not as bad as real demons are.
Right.
It's fiction. I can accept it. But that doesn't mean that the shape of the fiction doesn't impact the aesthetics of it for me. Because, and this really comes out. I mean, partly the aesthetics, like when you have a character acting a little too much like God, like the judge in various scenes, it's like, okay, I'm not liking the aesthetics of this, even if I can pretend this is a parallel universe where she's got these powers that the true God has allowed her to have. It gets uncomfortable for me. I enjoy it less. that happens in a big way in the ending, because the really what you have here, this is like this is sort of like Buddhism, where it's okay, we have this eternal cycle of experiences that we eventually can get out of and achieve nirvana and just kind of become floaty little energy bits or whatever. I think there is a truth here in the final 2 episodes. The truth is, at least arguably, it's the truth that a fallen existence like they have here in the afterlife, if prolonged, I mean, it's pleasant, but it's also fallen. People are not perfect. They're not wrapped in fields of endless joy and light, worshiping the source of infinite goodness, or plugged into the source of infinite goodness. They have a finitely pleasant existence with fallen elements. And it's at least arguably true that if you had an infinitely long fallen existence without the source of infinite truth and meaning in it, you could get bored.
Right.
And you could want to leave that. That's at least arguably true. I'm not convinced it is true, but thinking of an afterlife without God, without infinite goodness in it, how is that going to be satisfying for all eternity? You know, and so I think they've actually done an arguably fair representation of what it would be like in the afterlife without God. You know, the idea, people often will say, oh, if it's sitting around on clouds playing harps, that's not interesting. Yeah, that's just an image. It's not going to be sitting around on clouds playing harps. It's going to be having the most amazing relationship ever with infinite goodness, which is inexhaustible and therefore will never become boring.
Right.
Well, if you're not depicting that as the afterlife, then arguably, okay, yeah, people would get tired of it and want to leave. And this is a reasonable depiction of an afterlife without God. So I can accept it as a reasonable depiction of an afterlife without God that arguably has a truth that it's expressing. But I'm also disappointed by that because it's not the real afterlife, and it doesn't convey what the glory and majesty of being in touch with infinite goodness and knowing that you are infinitely loved and have and will be for all time and will never be exhausted or bored because there are always new adventures. Like C.S. Lewis says at the end of The Last Battle, all of the previous Chronicles of Narnia were just the title page of a novel, and now the real story is beginning, where every chapter is better than the last and it never ends. That's what the real afterlife is going to be like. And by comparison, The Good Place's end leaves me flat.
You know, if there's one thing that this series does for me, I mean, it's entertaining. I have to say that. The series has entertained me, and it's been fun. But one thing it does for me, too, in addition to that, is it lets me see and somewhat understand the viewpoint of a lot of people about the life, death, and what comes after. This, I think this represents the mindset or the outlook of a lot of people. And it can be hard to imagine, like, how from a Christian point of view, how do you get through life without believing in a good God and an eternal happiness in the beatific vision? How do you get through life like that? And this shows this is how people imagine it. This is what their ideal would be like, is heaven is like this life, better, arguably. And then at some point you get to end it, and then there's nothing, because that's because, everyone realizes that would eventually get boring. And so we move on. And wow, that is an interesting insight into how a lot of people think.
I actually kind of agree with Brent when he shows up and it's like, I expected something better.
Yeah.
And that's true. It's just the real afterlife, if you get to heaven, it's going to be better than The Good Place.
Right.
I saw, the last 2 episodes were my least favorite. I mean, there was funny parts to it, but
yeah, it
was hard for me to really get into it because it was so anti-human to me. First off, the idea that, well, would rather just be in oblivion once I get bored is so against human nature of, no one wants to cease to exist. That's a primordial fear that helps us know that there is something more than this. We all have that. there also was elements to suicide. It was like, well, you can choose when it's time for you to just end.
Yep.
And once you feel like you have nothing else to give or you're no more useful or whatever, you can just choose to end. And that's a good thing that everyone needs to celebrate. And we'll have a party for it, and then you can just stop existing. And it was just full of a bunch of lies. I mean, it was just full, to me, it was just like very untruths being expounded, especially in his last episode where, no, this isn't good that your friends are now ceasing to exist or going on to whatever. But that's the way I understood it. They were basically going to be not exist anymore. And I was watching it with my daughter, my 19-year-old daughter and my wife, and we just kept on looking at each other like, this is dumb. This isn't natural. This isn't something that to be happy about. How can these people be okay with being separated from each other and being separated from everything that matters? And it really did turn into a navel gazing, it's all about me and when I'm ready to go and the heck with everybody else and how they feel. Which I think with what you were saying, Dom, that's what it turned into, really just a reflection of what secular society thinks of the universe.
Yeah, this is something, I mean, the suicide themes here, even though it's not suicide in the real world sense of killing your body, but it is the same thing on a conceptual level, and it is at that point bucking human nature because we are programmed not to kill ourselves. And if you're properly functioning, you don't want to kill yourself. And by imagining this endless scenario of what really is a medium place, it conveys the idea of you could get so bored, suicide seems like a good option. And that's just not artistically satisfying. What I was struck with is the hollowness of this as a secular afterlife. And it's like, yeah, okay, this is about the best you could hope for out of a secular afterlife with no actual God, no actual source of infinite goodness. And it's hollow, it's empty. And this is what secularism the best secularism has to offer people.
It's really I mean, and from the Christian point of view, the way to heaven is heaven. Jesus is the way, and that way is loving, self-sacrificing. You give yourself away. And once you perfect that, you are a saint and you go right to heaven, or you perfect it, you
get season one.
Purgatory, but then you get to heaven and you spend eternity doing what you learned to do on earth. What these people did in heaven was to go back to basically being the losers, navel-gazing, it's all about me and what I can do to have fun and fulfill myself. That didn't have a lot to do with what they could do for one another. I mean, there were aspects of that, with Eleanor and what they were doing for each other and how she, helped that medium girl, come and stuff. But for the most part, it was like, oh, I've done this. Tahani had her list. She was crossing off. It had nothing to do with loving others. It was just trying to make yourself somehow better from the world point of view. It no longer was forget about me and let's see what I can do for others. So that it was such a lie that it was hard for me to even go to where you were, Jimmy, with, well, okay, I can see if there was no God and, this is how it would be. And I can understand that, but it was too unlike reality for me to really even try to get there. And I've watched some weird science fiction stuff, and I just couldn't get there with what they were doing in these last two episodes.
Yeah, even though, like I said, even though I can find elements of truth in it, that doesn't mean that the whopping elements of untruth in it don't cause it to become distasteful and unpleasant.
Yeah.
Right. It is a shame that it went there, but yeah, I mean,
if only they'd gone up in the balloon and we saw them arriving and it was brilliant and filled with light and love, and that was the end.
Yeah, something like Ghost with Patrick Swayze. Just well, look at everybody's here and I get to go and it's wonderful. Whatever her name, it's wonderful, Demi. Can't wait to see you here. And that was it. Which is where most of I understand the temptation to let's explore it. No one ever does. We always kind of leave it as this unknowing thing, which it really is. But they, once they got there, they really messed up.
I mean, I wouldn't.
Sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect Michael Schur, who has spent the last 4 seasons breaking every convention when it comes to making the TV show, to not break that convention and to go. I mean, that would have been out of character for him to not show us heaven and make it seem as different than what is expected. I get that. It is disappointing. One of the things I noticed is I see this chart on Wikipedia of the ratings over time, and every series is like this, where if it's a good series, especially first season is really high, and then it goes down from there. But
there are exceptions. X-Files picked up viewers for several seasons before it started declining.
That's right. This one had a pretty steady decline. I mean, this last season was the least watched of all 4 of them.
And that's why it ended in this season, because he apparently had enough material to do at least 5 seasons, but they decided to cut it off because they could see cancellation was coming given their low numbers.
Yeah, it's a shame in one sense, but I'm also glad they didn't drag it out, because that would not have been good either. In fact, I almost felt as we got into this season, it's time to start wrapping it up. That things were starting to get a little long myself.
Yeah, the 4th season is definitely not my favorite. I'd have to watch all 4 again to definitively rank them. I liked season 1. I loved the end of season 1.
Yeah.
I liked season 2. I really liked season 3. Season 4 wasn't as engaging to me. They could have done the same conceptual work and gotten to where they should have ended it in half the episodes they did.
Yeah. Yeah,
there's also people like what was his name? I love this actor, Mike O'Malley, who played Jeff, who loved frogs.
Yes.
I mean, why is he satisfied with frogs? I mean, doesn't that get boring? I mean, and finally he gets a real frog, Mr. Jumpy Legs or whatever he calls him. And I'm like, I thought, oh my gosh, he'd never had a real frog before, and now he can get a variety of real frogs, but. There was those inconsistencies. As why is suddenly Tahani going to be fine? As long as she's an architect, now she'll be happy with eternity.
Well, for a few Jeremy Bearamys at least.
Yeah,
right.
Until she decides to walk through the door again.
I mean, we can't see everybody on the series walk through the door, and it's a nice moment when Tahani actually re-engages and has a purpose, because we will in the afterlife have purposes. It's not going to be sitting around on clouds playing harps. We're told we're going to rule. Reign and rule with Jesus forever in the new creation. So we're going to have stuff to do. And there will be meaning there. Mm-hmm. Also, I like the moment where the doorman gets the real frog, because he is getting bored. He is getting bored with all the frog mugs and dolls and stuff.
Yeah, the last time we saw him, he's like,
real one. Yeah.
And Michael thinks he's going to name it after him. And Mr. Jumpy Legs. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean that there is so much that's clever in this show. The writing, just even in the names of all of the Good Place stores. Like every episode, they had a new set of names for those. Just every time you saw it. I mean, there was so much that was cleverly done, and as a sitcom, it was very well written in that sense.
And for a sitcom, this is not like a 2-set place. This is heavily, intensively computer graphics.
Yes.
With all the amazing stuff they do in the neighborhood, and the neighborhood folds up and the neighborhood is recreated. And we have the interdimensional Hole of Pancakes weird version, and the architecture of the afterlife with the endless black void. We have Janet's white void. I mean, there's a ton of CGI going into this. So, I can see why even on like USA or something, a really small network, 2 million viewers by the end would be considered acceptable, not on the budget this involves.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, not to mention the star power. I mean, they had some pretty good actors, in it, even in bit parts. That's not cheap either.
Oh, well, I like that Mary Steenburgen shows up as Michael's guitar teacher at the end of the 4th season. Ted Danson's real wife. Nick Offerman shows up as himself, teaching woodworking to Tahani, because Nick Offerman is actually a really good expert craftsman in woodworking in real life.
Also, Timothy Oliphant, one of the actors that Judge Jen has a crush on, shows up as a simulated version of himself to help sell her on the new plan.
That's right. That's right. You know, one of the things that we liked about the show when we talked about it in the first two seasons was how much philosophy is in this show. And in fact, two of the philosophers that were philosophical advisors to the writers show up in a philosophy class that Chidi is teaching. Pamela Hieronymi and Todd May are both philosophers, and they show up as themselves talking to Chidi at one point. But the philosophy when I mentioned the show first mentioned the show to you, Jimmy, I mentioned it's a sitcom about philosophy. And I think that's I thought that will interest Jimmy. It's a smart show like that. It's a very smart show, and I think there's not enough of that out there.
I thought it was funny, speaking of philosophers, that at the last episode, they were talking about the people that had gotten in, and they mentioned St. Thomas Aquinas.
Yes,
and it's like true. You called him Saint, and now it was just, and Chidi's like, yes, he made it. It was just kind of weird,
kind of funny.
And that was also one of the few mentions of any Christian philosophers, at least that I noticed.
Yeah, they talk about St. Thomas Aquinas in a bunch of episodes, or a number of episodes, and it's always positive.
Right, right. At least that,
I like that. I also like the references to real philosophical schools. So for people who may not know, that's what my academic training is in philosophy. But I like in the Jeremy Bearimy episode, after they've learned they're all apparently damned, they're dealing with that, and Chidi has a breakdown where he goes to the supermarket in a daze and buys all this stuff he doesn't need, and then goes to his philosophy class and has all this candy, like marshmallow peeps and stuff, that he starts cooking in an enormous pot of chili. and it's disgusting. And he's talking to his class about different, they're asking, it's an ethics class, so they're asking about ethics, and he says, let me tell you, my little chicky babies, there are several schools of ethics. There's virtue ethics, there's consequentialism, there's deontology, but I'm going to tell you the truth: nihilism.
Yes.
And he's just at that moment of despair and eating his horrible candy chili and before he gets re-engaged.
Yes, that's Chidi at his low point, where he's finally just descended into nihilism. Yeah. So any last thoughts you want to share on The Good Place seasons 3 and 4?
What is Eleanor going to do with the calendar after the end of just 1 year? I was wondering how that was set up. He left her a calendar of himself.
Oh, Chidi, yes.
Chidi, yeah. And I couldn't help but think, well, she's flipping it, and that's going to go by pretty fast.
Well, they're Bearamies, so yeah.
I suppose. But then she's going to have to look at one picture for a whole Bearimy. That's going to be a long time. And
true.
Not that that's my super final thought, but I mean, I'll let that go for a moment now. But that's just one thing I was wondering about.
Anything else we want to, Jimmy? Any final thoughts on this?
I thought it was a series that had a lot of promise, and I enjoyed it. And I liked how, and I think I don't know if you delete your text or not, but after you recommended it to me, and I started watching the first season, I could see where it was going to go in a bunch of respects. I said, okay, it's going to turn out they're not in the real good place. They're either in purgatory or the bad place. I predicted there was going to be a medium place, and I predicted that the real, quote unquote, real Eleanor Shellstrop was going to show up. And those things then happened. Yep. I could also foresee what would happen at the beginning of each season, but I liked the fact that they would blow through the obvious and take us into new territory quickly in each season. And so in the latter seasons, I would have a good fix on what's about to happen. But then they would surprise me, like they didn't pick up on the obvious idea in season 3 of, oh, now that they think they're damned, they're actually doing virtuous acts that they should get points for.
Right.
And I kind of wish they had integrated that into the show in some way, even with just a line of dialogue. So, yeah, you got some points, but it wasn't enough. And I overall, I thought the show was very creative. It was very sweet. It was charming. It was visually interesting to look at. didn't end the way I wanted it to. I didn't think they landed it the way they should. But overall, would I recommend it to someone as something to watch that's entertaining and interesting to think about? For someone who, sure, for someone who's mature in their faith, yeah.
Yeah, definitely in my line of work, I'm not going to recommend it at the end of a catechetical session that people go watch this to learn more about the afterlife. But it's definitely entertaining. And the thing for me, when it comes to, I think especially sitcoms, but any television show, is I have to like the main characters. There has to be something about them that's endearing, and that I root for them, and that I enjoy watching what they go through. And I liked all of the main characters. I really like Eleanor. I just, the one-liners, she was really funny. She would go off on these weird tangents and stuff, and I enjoyed her. Tahani, with her constant name dropping, was just so. Yes. I mean, she brought name dropping to an art form that was I've never seen before. The way she would constantly bring these up, and you knew she was telling the truth, that she really did have these experiences with these people. That half the time I didn't know who they were, but I knew she was name dropping. And you never knew what. Jason was going to do.
Yes.
His stupidity, and like when you found out how he got arrested and how he died, he had the most strange death, and you loved him. And even when Michael, at the end, when he found out he was a demon and what he was doing, he became, this likable, sympathetic character as he got on their side, which you just were rooting for him to do. Right. So, I liked them all. And, I think that for me, I mean, I liked Chidi, but he was the most frustrating character for me because of his indecision. But at the same time, he's the one guy who I had the most trouble. Why did he go to the bad place? Just because he was indecisive. I never
tortured,
really quite...
and tortured everyone around him with his indecision.
Yeah.
I guess that's it.
Just because you're annoying, it doesn't mean, annoying people go to hell. That's kind of like what we think they should go, but that's not really necessarily true. So, but Chidi's character was, it was obviously a very necessary character for the whole plot and the whole story to move along. But I liked and rooted for the characters right up until the last episode when they were all deciding to go into oblivion or whatever. And then I was just like, you guys are disappointing me. But, I think with what you said, Jimmy, if you decide to watch this, which of course people listening to this have already done so, but if you tell someone, if you want to stop watching it when it gets to this certain episode, which is the balloon going up in the first season, that might be good. But, keep watching if you want to.
In the fourth season. Yeah.
Yes.
I liked all of the characters. I thought they were really sweet. And I love Janet.
Yes.
Oh, Janet. I forgot about Janet. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was probably my favorite. And you were able to accept the fact that she was a lot more human than she was supposed to be.
That she thought she herself was.
Yeah. Or obviously she was supposed to be more of a robot, but I mean, here she had a relationship with a human and
not a robot
and everything. So, a very interesting one at that. But she was great. She was hilarious. And she was another one of just a likable character where for me, the opposite example, I was very happy when Seinfeld ended and they all went to jail for being jerks because I was starting to dislike every one of them intensely. That's just me, but I didn't, their characters were so self-centered and horrible. They were just annoying the heck out of me, and I was happy to see them go to jail. I was happy that they realized that the season should end that way. Whereas this one, I really liked all the characters for all 4 seasons.
That's my final thought on this. Is I like how the characters evolved. I like how especially Eleanor and Chidi evolved. Chidi at the end, I really liked Chidi. He wasn't annoying like he was in the first season. He finally had reached this place where he was no longer indecisive. No, he knew what he wanted. He knew what he could. He was selfless about his love. And Eleanor was the same way. She was still a little flawed, but she eventually got to that place too. I like that. Jason in his, silly naivete, there was a sweetness in him, and he eventually evolved to a certain place. I love that his conception of heaven is living in the hot wing place, because there's a part of me that
Nick's hot wings. Yeah.
There's a part of me that is with him on that. I have to admit. And in heaven, I don't get heartburn from wings.
Well, you could be in Sheedy's place with hot wings right there.
Yeah, I'll be at there'll be a Drover's in the next room. That's a deep cut, a deep Steubenville cut for you, Michael. But I do love that everyone evolved in some ways and became better people through this, and that's one of the things I like about this, is that you can like the characters and you don't get tired of them or sick of them, or they don't get annoying. They became better people. So
yeah, and they get you through all the nonsense that's going on that can sometimes be a little taxing, especially in the end. But it makes it's about them. It's a character as much as the whole plot is so crucial and gets you into it. They're the reason you keep watching.
So we should probably wrap things up there before we take an eternity doing this podcast. So
yeah, we don't want this to be no exit.
Yeah, exactly. So before we go, I do want to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Movies and TV shows, including John M., Jerry M., Louise M., all the M's, Craig B., and Peter D. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear from you what you thought of The Good Place, especially seasons 3 and 4. You can let us know by going to sqpn.com/secrets or the StarQuest Facebook page, or you can send an email to secrets@sqpn.com. Until next time, Mike Dens, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of The Good Place seasons 3 and 4.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it.
And Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom, and everything is fine.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Movies and TV shows on StarQuest, and Still Not a Robot.